Hey, She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays the Day podcast. I am your host, Dr. Brunclik. Wait, do I say Dr. Brunclik or do I say Lauryn Brunclik? What episode is this? And okay, hold on. Here's why I got confused is because as I was going into like default, I realized my ADHD kicked in and I was like, wow, you start the podcast, Hey, She Slayers. And is that like fair considering we know that probably about 20% of the listeners, if not more now, is males? So that's why I got confused because I started thinking while I was on my intro. So you're not supposed to think, Lauryn, just go with it. All right. I don't know. I'm not going to call you they slayers. So men, well, you're just a she slayer because you support She Slays the Day. It doesn't mean you're a she. Doesn't mean any of that. It just means you support the podcast that happens to have the pronoun she in it, which in itself is an issue because the podcast is no longer just for women. I don't know what to tell y'all. Okay, we're not doing a rebrand. There it is. She is me. So if you're a she slayer, you're supporting the podcast, but the she in the podcast is me. So you're supporting me. She slayer equals I like Lauryn. That's what that means. All right, there we go. We solved it. We're fine. All right, would you like some free therapy advice? I got some free therapy advice. No, sorry, it was not free. I had to pay for it. I got therapy from my therapist at $140. But so we're talking about how I really have let go of a lot of control stuff in the last like month, almost like oddly fast. But one of the things that I'm still very much holding on to is my idea that in order to feel good about my day, I need to have been super productive. And like checklists are very important. And how reading, I think I literally said to her, reading is destroying my life because I make really dramatic statements like that. And she's also a reader. And I said, like, I will get into a book and for instance, Tuesdays, Thursday morning, and all day Friday, I have a ton of flexibility. Like I'm kind of always working, but like, I don't have to. A lot of things aren't pressing. So on a Thursday morning, if I spend 2 hours reading, I will like beat myself up about it, but I'll keep reading because I'm really into the book. And so we're getting to the good part. So she's talking about how like where is this coming from? This need to prove to people this thing. Like you've already done it. Like you've already got the podcast. You already have the successful business. You already have like what your goals were. And I was like, well, I could do more. She's like, okay, but on paper, great. At what point does a lion need to stop proving it's a lion? And I was like, what? And she's like, a lion doesn't prove it's a lion. And I was like, holy shit, I'm going to get a lion tattooed on my body now. And I think this works. So like, I really identify as a lion because, obvious reasons, mostly because I'm a Leo. If you're confused, because you're like, wait a minute, Lauryn, I know so much about you. And your birthday's in September, you're a Libra. Ha, different story for a different day. I'm actually a Leo, even though my birthday's September 29th. If you are into astrology enough to be able to figure that out, good for you. If you don't know anything about astrology, then you don't care, then no worries. But it works for other things. Like if you're just like a really chill person who's analytical and cerebral, and maybe you go around in life feeling the need to like prove to people that you know things. Like then it's like, well, an elephant doesn't need to prove it's an elephant or whatever animal you identify with. Like doesn't need to be a lion. Like it's just this idea that you are what you are and you don't need to prove it. But for somehow, you guys, so the statement, you are what you are and you don't need to prove that to other people just does not carry the same weight as a lion doesn't need to prove it's a lion. Are we all in agreement? I know that you can't respond right now, but like right now, just be like, yeah, no, you're right. But adding the lion in there really upset. Other funny story. So the other day, Kirby and I were driving. We were listening to the Lex Friedman podcast with RFK Jr. on it. And I like pause and proceeded to tell him, so I have a new dream business. So prior to this, my dream was like owning a plant shop. It's evolving a little bit with my tastes. So now I said, okay, there is this company or this bookstore in New York City called The Ripped Bodice, and they exclusively sell like romance novels and fantasy novels and things like this. And it's just pink and it's so cute. It is like Instagrammable and I love it. It's so great. I haven't been there, obviously. I just followed it on Instagram. And I said, like, so this is now my new dream. I want a a bookstore that is like super themed. It would be like romance, fantasy. Um, what's the other? So I went to Barnes and Noble and realized that the genre of books that I like are spread across fantasy, sci-fi, and romance, I think. Oh, no, and young adult, which we're not gonna talk about. The books that I have read that have been labeled young adult, um, excuse me, ma'am. But I did learn that, and I don't know if this is true because I don't fact check anything, that a book will be young adult based on the age of the main character. So, like, if the main character is 19, that's young adult. No. And for anybody who's read A Court of Thorns and Roses, like, that's in high school libraries. Mhm. Yep. Okay. So, anyways, so I paused this podcast and I'm like, Kirby, I have this idea. And God bless Kirby because he doesn't start poking holes in things. He just lets me like talk and like actually lets me like work out like how I would market it and what like the problems would be. We have a current working title of The Steamy Cauldron is the name of my bookstore. Okay. And like you can fast forward 60 seconds if you don't want to hear my idea, but I think it's a really good idea. And I'm giving you permission to do this idea in your town too. So it might be a great passive income. Oh, no, not passive income. Absolutely high intensity work for very, very low monetary value. So it's actually a bad idea. Don't do it. But there'd be coffee. And actually, what we do, because we'd want to keep it like small and intimate, is I would let my husband, we'd like divide the space in two, and he would have like his own very like navy blue leathers, Ernest Hemingway. Like you can buy like 2 fingers of scotch. That's for those non drinkers out there. That's an amount. So, like 2 fingers, if you go sideways, that's how much scotch you would get in a glass. And so you'd come in this one entrance, you could get your coffee, and then you could like go over here, and this would be like the steamy cauldron, and then over there would be boring Hemingway stuff or whatever. Kurt Vonnegut, all that stuff. Yeah, it just sounds so great and fun. But then we came to the conclusion that I really just like the idea of starting the project and like all the like new problems to solve of like how do you become a bookseller? And like how would I overcome some of the hurdles that I anticipate a lot of book owners or bookstore owners experience? Like for instance, because I thought about this and talked for an hour with Kirby. For instance, I feel like my ideal person would be the person who reads like 3, 4 books a month, right? Um, well, they probably have a Kindle and they probably have Kindle Unlimited. So, like the last 4 books I've read were free, like free. Well, 14.99 a month. So, like, how do you overcome that? I have so many other, like I said, I legit talked for an hour with Kirby about this. If anybody wants our business plan, shoot me a DM. But that is how I know that I have issues and need to keep going to therapy. No, that's how I know I'm an Enneagram 3 who has ADHD and gets bored and just loves the idea of starting new projects that are creative outlet. So there we go. What else do I have for you? I think that's it. Okay, so today, so I actually wanted this episode to be like a month ago, but Meagan McGuire, who is my student loan expert, couldn't get on till like 3 days ago. So we are like budging it to the front. There's like a bunch of very cool, great podcasts that are coming that I've already recorded that technically, if we were going in order, this wouldn't be going here, but I don't know why I told you that. That's not, you don't really need to know that. I was just saying I was excited about this because I know there's been a lot of changes in student loans. So this is gosh, every time we talk about student loans, I start sweating, even though I've paid mine off, and just like realizing the effed up game that this is. So this is a very interesting, I think even if you don't have student loans, listening to how student loans are handled in this country is it's kind of fascinating. Like it's like, what? What? This is a weird, broken ass system. So Meagan is a certified student loan professional, AKA wizard, with Student Loan Planner and helps people navigate their student loans. So she keeps it fun. This is actually her second time on the podcast. I've had her create special content for my multi passionate chiropreneur group. I really like Meagan. I keep coming back to her specifically, even though like Student Loan Planner is this big organization with multiple people. Now she's, I think, in charge of people. So I don't think you can actually, you might be able to work with her, but like it's more like she's gotten a promotion now. And so now you work with people under Meagan. But I also think that you get a discount if you say my name. I think. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure you get like $200 off if you say she slays. Just try it. You should just, in fact, just try that in general. Just like go to Applebee's and be like, promo code she slays? No? No? Okay. You're like checking out at bananarepublic.com and you're like, promo code she slays? I don't know. So I'm pretty sure something is somewhere and you can save money. If you're actually interested, I do have an email out to them. Like, didn't I become an affiliate at some point for you guys to get people a discount? Like how do people do that? I don't know. I'll do my best. Maybe there'll be a link below. Maybe there won't. Sorry. Sorry. All right. Without further ado, let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for education, for being in a country where we have so many options to pay for education. Thank you for solutions out there. Be with people who are really feeling the weight of an education that they paid for. You know, it's one thing if you love it and you can find a way to make it work for you, but my heart goes out there, God, to so many chiropractors that have accrued so much debt and they're frustrated with their situation. Maybe they love their job, but not their pay. They're just frustrated with the situation they're in. And they feel like because of money, they wish they would have picked a different job and just like be with them and like remind them that there's so much potential in this career and there's so much impact and that like there are options. There are options. And please just stick with chiropractic if you love it. Don't go become a bank teller or something like that. So in your name we pray. Amen. Okay, crew, here is Meagan McGuire. Oh, I have Zoom up because this is for YouTube and you guys can't see me dancing right now, but you two can. What were we saying? Oh, yes. Without further ado, here is my interview with Meagan McGuire, student loan wizard. Enjoy. Okay, so you said you're really busy right now. Like what?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just everybody who has student loans is starting to panic because payments are really kicking in now. So it's
So as
overwhelming
we're
for a lot of
recording,
people.
it's September 15th. Are payments restarting October?
Hmm.
Okay. So just for the audience who hasn't listened, we'll link your previous episode ago from forever. But when we recorded, even back in, let's just say 2021, no, I think, or 2019, that's the story we're going with. It's
Okay.
20,
Yeah. Actually, yeah, you're probably right. I think my sense of time is just like right now.
we have no idea. We have no idea. Anyways, but years ago, I had already paid off student loans. So
Yeah.
myself going into this conversation is really just fact finding for other people because I have no idea what's been going on. I
Hmm.
didn't pay attention during the pandemic. My understanding is nobody had to pay shit on shit, right?
Hmm. Right.
Now, just so we can make people feel bad about choices that they did or did not make and have no power over changing, what would your advice have been during that time? Because like my brain went to like, what kind of has changed because I've done so much
Yeah.
work in the like financial investment world
Hmm.
where like I was thinking I had associates who were not making payments and I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, why aren't you like paying down because the principal was, you could like, if you get that interest done, you can just go
Mhm.
straight at principal. Why aren't you doing that? But like,
Mhm.
was that the smartest thing for everyone to do or not even remotely?
No. Yeah, so that might seem like the smart thing to do because that's what we've always been taught, like, pay down your debt as soon as possible. But most, well, I would say the majority of the people who have very large student loan balances compared to their income, they wanna be doing loan forgiveness. And so the COVID forbearance timeframe counted towards that loan forgiveness for free without
Oh,
having to pay. Yeah. So
got it.
people who are doing the IDR forgiveness, like, they wouldn't wanna pay because 'cause they're already getting credit, and it probably would have been a good idea for those who are trying to pay the loans off, like those who are not doing the forgiveness path, but not for forgiveness folks.
Okay. So as it stands with chiropractors, I forget, is it 20 or 25 yees?
Depends on the plan, so it could be either.
Oh, okay. So this is all right. All right. So then what are what happened with the $10,000? Like I another thing that
Yeah.
like I don't even know if chiropractors paid attention to because they're like, "Oh, so instead of 270, it's 260." But like are people
Mhm.
getting 10,000?
No, that didn't end up coming through, so it
Okay.
was struck down and hasn't been talked about since. But,
All right.
I think the new income-driven plan that came out is probably better, like,
Okay.
for most folks, like, the 10,000, like you said, like, wasn't a huge deal for large balances, but the new income-driven plan is gonna be a bigger deal.
Okay, so will you talk now about what are the changes that we came out of COVID with?
Mhm, yep. So, oh gosh, there's a lot. So, the big one I just mentioned was the new income-driven plan. That one is, it's called SAVE, SAVE. That plan is taking over for what used to be called REPAY, revised pay as you earn. And basically the payment is cheaper, but the big deal with it as well is that it has a interest discount where let's say, your payment is not enough to cover the interest cost per month because it's based on income, then that accruing interest just usually would have gotten added to the balance and your balance would have just kept growing.
Right.
But Save waives any of the accruing interest. So the balance cannot grow on the save plan.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really nice because I remember, I say we paid off our loans in 5 years, but really it was 6 because the entire first year we were we somehow
Interest.
at the end of year 1, it had gone up and we were just like, "Oh, I don't think we're paying enough attention to this."
Yeah.
Okay, so that won't happen anymore. So
Yep.
now so is Save the only IDR that's available for people, or are there options? Because I feel like I've seen, just, like, newsletters and, like, things on Instagram being like, "How to know which option to do."
Yeah. There's still options. There's 4 different income-driven plans. Save is probably going to be the cheapest for the majority of people, but it is not the best for everybody, which I think is important to note. So there's also, a pay as you earn plan, PAYE. That's the 20-year timeline to forgiveness. Save is 25. So
Okay.
some folks might wanna compare, do they care more about being done with the loan sooner, or are they okay with the 25-year timeline for a cheaper payment? So we're doing a lot of comparisons between those 2 plans right now. Then there's income-based repayment or IBR, which is based on 15% of discretionary income. So less and less people that plan is gonna make sense for. Same with
How come?
ICR. Just because it's more expensive than Save or
And it's
Pay.
still 20 years?
IBR is 25 if you have graduate
Oh,
loans. Yep, and it's 20, the new IBR plan is 20. So there's old IBR and new IBR to make it
do
a
you
little more
automatic
confusing.
but no shit, I'm already I just need to let you know that I literally came the acronyms are already messing with me because I literally just came out of a recording with a topic that couldn't be s further from this. I just was talking to a chiropractic researcher and we were using like she was using all of these like research terms of EBM and so I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm already lost, but I'm making notes." Are you automatically if you were in the old IBR, are you automatically rolled into the new IBR?
So, no, because the new IBR, you couldn't have had any loans borrowed before July of 2014. So
Okay.
this is for like new borrowers who like borrowed in the recent, like past decade, pretty much. Those that did not, that borrowed a lot later than that, they would be on the old IBR. So
Okay.
that's what distinguishes the two for folks.
Okay. So
Hmm.
you had said save,
Hmm.
pay, IBR, and what's the fourth one you?
ICR, income contingent repayment, which that one's the worst of them all. It's 20% of discretionary income. It exists. There's a few scenarios where it makes sense. Parent plus borrowers, like who borrow for their kids' undergraduate education, like that's the only income driven plan they have access to. But for a lot of folks, it's not relevant, and we're usually not recommending it for any reason.
Okay. So that's the worst one. Unless you're a parent plus situation, you're not using ICR.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So then IBR is like the third worst.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who's doing that and why?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So
You're like, I don't know.
IBR, there's few circumstances, but there are very legitimate reasons to use IBR. Save, which is the newest, cheapest plan, does not have a payment cap. So the more and more your income is over time, the higher and higher your payment gets. IBR has somewhat of a payment cap where it can't go above a certain threshold. So for very high income earners that don't really make a lot of money early on, so like maybe think physicians or practice owners. This could be very relevant for practice owners where as an associate you don't make a lot and then as a practice owner you start making quite a bit more. If you have that big income jump but you still want to do forgiveness, then IBR might make more sense cuz it has that limit to what the payment could go up to.
What is the limit?
It's, based on taking the balance and spreading the payments out over 10 years, and you would pay the loan. So, basically, it's a standard 10-year payoff amount for, like, what the payment would be to pay off the loans in 10 years.
Okay. So to figure out what your limit is, you would take the amount you owe and figure out what
Mhm,
the standard tenure would be, and they'll never make you
mhm.
pay more than that.
Correct. Yep.
Oh, God, I'm like instantly taken back to the trauma of the first time that we recorded where I was sweating and it wasn't even
That's
my
true,
problem,
yeah.
but also math. Like I'm somebody who like I'll find my way. I'll be in a episode and I'll be like, so for instance, if you see 200 people a week and you spend 5 minutes with each person and I'm like on air going like, how many hours? Shit, why did I start doing math?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you do the math on let's say that I owe
Mhm.
200,000.
Yeah.
What would like a 10-year payoff
Mhm.
be on that?
Mhm.
What would that monthly cap be?
200, so that would be about 2,300 a month.
Okay, so the cap would be 2,300 a month.
Mhm.
And how much money would I have to be making? I'm sorry if this is you just seem really smart with numbers. So it seems like how much money would I have to be making a year
Mhm.
where if I was in the SAVE program, I was having to give more than 2,300 a month?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So let's back into that. So let's see. Save. So 2,300 is the cap. It would be, I think, about 350
So if
of
you
adjusted gross income.
which was
Um,
like a lot of money. That's
yeah.
that's
Actually, I think it's more like 325 or so. That would be around the limit. But yeah, so like adjusted gross income would have to be like pretty high in that scenario to get up to the cap, like 300 plus in that example. So a lot of people don't even need the cap. So that's why it's not super relevant to a lot of people. It's relevant to those that might have a smaller balance where the cap is a lot smaller.
Mhm.
And for those that do have a pretty big income jump in the future, like they're just crushing it, that's where it might make sense. But then the other benefit, so new IBR we talked about is 20 years. So for people who would value being done with loans in 20 years versus 25 from Save, then that might be a consideration too.
But
But
when you say people who would value being done,
mhm.
do you mean that from a monetary math perspective, or do you mean like They want to be done with this 5 years earlier.
Mhm. Both, because in a perfect world, the math works out better that we're done in 20 years and it's cheaper, but new IBR's payment is slightly higher than Save's payment. So you're paying slightly more per month for 20 years versus like a lower payment for 25 years. So we have to kind of run the math to see like, is it about the same or do you pay more because the payment's slightly more? So in a perfect world, it's cheaper both ways. It's cheaper because it's shorter and it's just cheaper from a total cost perspective. But sometimes the math, depending on your income and the balance, might shift more towards like the cheapest route is the 25-year plan, but you don't want to spend 25 years paying these. So you'd rather just pay a little bit more to be done sooner, if that makes sense.
Okay. So, what are some of the questions that you ask someone when you're helping them decide between those 4 plans?
hmm Yeah. One is I want to know their goals. You know, what are you looking to accomplish with the loans, but also in your other financial, endeavors? Are you someone that wants to, retire super early and you need to start saving for retirement right now? Are you someone who wants a lifestyle practice where you don't want to have to work a bunch of hours per week?
Doesn't
Are
everybody
you
say that's what their goal is? Like, is anybody coming and being like, "Nah, I'm gonna work till 65." That sounds awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. I do get some chiros that really love their work and they
They're fucking lying. They're brand new. They're brand new in practice,
maybe,
and
maybe.
they're trying to impress you. They're like, "Would you need a chiropractor?" I love it. We love what we do. We love what we do. And I plan on adjusting still when I'm 65? Absolutely. I will
Yeah.
adjust my husband the day he dies. It won't, just so we're
Mhm.
clear, it won't be the cause of his death, but like I'll just be like, I'm trying to get you a couple more hours, getting rid of the subluxation. Um,
Right.
but I don't want to be required to be in my practice at 65. So those people
Yeah.
are fucking lying. Okay. So, but for real,
Yeah.
this is the question of like, all right, so let's say I'm like a cute 25-year-old and I've got
Mhm.
this debt and I'm like, yeah, I would like to be living financially abundant and freedom abundant lifestyle as fast as possible. Is
Mhm.
there like, because you look at investing and
Mm.
the like, what is kind of is there like an average amount or interest rate that loans are at right now?
About 6 to 7%.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, when you're advising someone about retirement, how do let's say I said, like, I want to retire as early as possible, but I have
Mm.
this debt and it's at 7%.
Mhm.
So then, like, what's your next statement to that?
Yeah. Well, first, I would know, like, rule of thumb wise, like, if their balance is greater than their income, we're gonna wanna consider the forgiveness route.
Okay.
And so with that being the case, that gives us permission to not really care about what the interest rate is for the federal loans because then we're just going to pay as little as possible on an income driven plan until we get to forgiveness. And that goes alongside the same goal of wanting to be financially independent sooner because we're not prioritizing throwing a ton
You're
of money
not
into the
throwing an
loan.
extra 3,000 at your student loans. Okay, so
Mhm.
if your income is smaller than your your student loans when you
Mhm.
first start? So, like,
Mm.
basically, no, I'm answering my own question, I think, but make sure what I'm saying is like, if you decide when you graduate or like when you start, if you're like, all right, we're doing save, you wouldn't get to a point like the plan is to ride it out. You ride
Mhm.
that bitch out. So you do
Mhm.
not, I mean, you obviously could, but it wouldn't be like, oh, hey, so when I started, I was making 70 grand and I owed 200. But
Mhm.
now I'm making 150 and I only owe 110.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be like, now I'm switching. You're like, no, 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 no. You decided we're going with. So
Yeah.
most people are not going to be in the situation when they graduate that they're not choosing to ride
Mhm.
it out. This is
Right.
what we came to the first time. And I was just so depressed and so sweaty.
Yeah.
Really though, but like some people it has to change, right? When does Like
When does it switch?
yeah.
Like, from the forgiveness to the aggressive? So it switches. I see a couple scenarios where it could switch. One is if someone was super lucky or had family money or had help to not have to borrow as much. So let's say maybe they borrowed like half of what an average student would borrow, then the debt to income ratio thing, like it might be a little better
Yep.
to consider paying the loans off. And if they're coming from family money too, like their parents might be like, "Oh yeah, we'll help you pay for it. Don't worry about it."
Mhm.
So they're already kind of
Those
thinking like,
people.
yeah,
I
those people. So
We
that's one
love you people. We're
scenario.
not judging you. We're not judging you. We're just jealous. That's all.
We
That's all
are.
you're picking up on. Just jealous.
1,000%. Yes. So that's one scenario. Other scenarios have to do with more so like spousal income. Like if your spouse makes quite a bit of income and because when you're married, the student loans do affect the tax filing status that you have affects what your payment's going to be. So if you're married and your spouse earns a lot of money, but let's say they don't have student loans, if you're filing taxes jointly, that payment's going to be based off of your joint income, not just your income. And so sometimes we talk about strategies of like filing taxes separately to exclude spousal income, but in some states and in some income scenarios, it's just too expensive to file separate. So in those scenarios, like where the spouse's income is quite high, it might change the path to where we're not doing forgiveness, we're paying it off because mathematically it just doesn't really make sense to go a different way. Which, that's more rare. I feel like a lot of chiros tend to marry chiros.
Yeah.
Um,
Fucking
so
idiots. I am sorry. But like, what were you doing? Oh, I'm married chiropractor. I married a business person. I was smart.
yeah.
Like, come on. Or marrying a dentist. Like, no, no,
Yeah.
don't be doing that shit.
Yeah,
Okay.
dentists have a lot of student loan debt too. Like any like professional degree like could come with a lot of student loans unless there was a lot of scholarship, like a lot of scholarship opportunity or grant money or family money. Like you're going to have a lot of debt unless you
Yeah.
have
Well,
those things.
the big difference though is I was talking at a bar to a dentist and I didn't need to throw the bar. My friend who's a dentist, but then I just decided to admit that we were at a bar talking about this. Um,
Honesty.
right. So we were talking how because they're trying to find a dentist. We live in this tiny town. It's very hard to
Mm,
get doctors. I'm trying to find a chiropractor.
mhm,
It's hard to
mhm,
bring people to Rice Lake, Wisconsin
mhm,
unless your family's here. And I was like, well, just out of curiosity, like, what does an average dentist pay? Like,
mm,
I'm sorry, that's a nosy question, but like the average associate chiropractor is going to make 50 to 100 their first year out of school. Like, that's a big
mhm.
range. And she said, like 120 to 150 and then
About right.
plus. And I was like, oh, yeah. So they're getting paid more.
Mhm.
So.
They're getting paid more. They do borrow. I mean, they have a lot of debt too. Like, I think, let me actually see. I'm going to look at our stats. I'm pretty sure dentists are still the most indebted profession.
And it takes so much to start up because of their technology.
It does. Yep. And yeah, practice loans are very, very relevant with if you're starting like a practice in dentistry. A lot of times that's the goal is like you go to dental school to become a practice owner at some point. A lot of folks don't want to be an associate forever. But yeah, it is dentists. It's dentists, physicians, veterinarians, and then chiropractors. That's
Okay.
typically the what we see.
Okay. So we should stop complaining because we're okay. All right.
You're still up
So,
there though.
right. So we're going through questions you asked someone, and then I got us way off track.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I already know kind of the rule of thumb. Like already have an idea of where their income is with their balance. I ask about their goals, their objectives. We'll probably talk marital status stuff like marriage. And then from there, we're starting to run some numbers. And then I think some of the numbers start to bring up other questions and conversations like, is you know, X amount of payment per month, is that doable? Like, do you feel comfortable with that? Are you okay with the fact that we're going to have to save for taxes in the future for the forgiveness route? That was I think last time we had this podcast. That's when you like panicked.
Mhm.
You like really blew up then. You were like,
Yeah.
"What?
Yeah. I'm
Don't you have to
stressed for
pay
people.
taxes?" So, we talk about that and yeah, we
Well,
just
what is you say if somebody's like, "No," because like, it's a math equation, what the government's
Mm,
gonna say you owe, right?
yeah.
So,
Mhm.
like, if they're like, I'm not comfortable with that," no deal.
Yeah. Yeah, no deal, and then we talk about alternatives. So, like, let's use maybe that, early associate example. So let's say, like, 100,000 is what they're making, first couple years in practice, maybe first 5 years in practice. Um, $200,000 balance. Let's see where that goes. So with that, the payment's about 560, and maybe $100 more for the pay plan, but about 560 a month on the save plan. The tax implication going that path, don't choke again, is about it's about 80,000 that we'd have to pay. And for folks that don't know this, when you go towards loan forgiveness, whatever balance you get forgiven, the IRS sees as taxable to you because it's the IRS. They want to tax us on everything. So it's a benefit that you got that balance forgiven. So they send the student loan servicer sends you a 1099 and you have to pay taxes on it. So not only are we like preparing for the student loan payments here, but we're also saving proactively for this tax implication if we're going towards loan forgiveness. And so in this example, we have on save the balance forgiven 200,000 because the payments are never enough to touch the principal. So we're
Oh, oh,
yeah,
wow. Oh, okay, you said on pay or on
on
save.
save. Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so you would calculate and it'd be like, "All right, your payment's gonna be 560, you owe
Mhm.
200, your the amount you owe will never decrease."
Right. Yeah, in this income example. Yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
So it's pretty much like
That's a
paying
hard thing to
interest.
wrap your brain around.
Yes. Yeah, so a lot of our conversations sometimes talk through these, like, emotions and, like,
I was gonna
unwinding what we
say,
kind of know
yeah.
about
Like, 'cause
debt.
you have to, like, train someone because, like, the instinct would be like, "Okay, well, I'm not comfortable with just writing a $560 check and never seeing the amount come down."
Yeah.
And you have to, like, talk people like me off a ledge being like, "But that is the smartest thing to do."
Yeah.
This is a
Yeah.
fucked up system, Megan.
It's very, very messed up. Yep. And what's crazy, so then we'll narrow it down, we'll crunch the numbers. So the estimated payments that this person would make over time would be about 218 in this example. So they do end up paying
Right? Oh, yeah, they
218,000.
end up paying their
Mhm.
dude.
But it's all to interest because of the interest rate. I use a 6.8% interest rate. The balance forgiven is 200. The IRS may make you pay taxes on that. So highest tax bracket range, like I usually try to give the most you could ever pay, which is 40% federal and state. That would be 80,000 that we would owe the IRS in the year of forgiveness, 25 years from now. And that total balance shakes out to 298. So you pay payments plus the taxes, 298 for your $200,000 balance, which when we look at it that way, it's not cheaper than paying it off within 10 years, but it's within $20,000 of paying it off in 10 years.
How
So what I
come?
mean by that,
Okay, yeah.
um yeah, so what I mean by that is the standard 10-year, if we were just to pay the payments of 2,300 a month, which would be a lot for someone off of 100,000 of income, like a lot. That's a rent payment or a mortgage payment.
Mhm.
So keep that in mind, like 2,300 a month for 10 years, that total cost shakes out to 276. And the
Oh,
save example we were just looking at shook out to 298. So it's about a $20,000 difference.
and this is critical time in your life where, like, okay, you could be doing
Mhm.
2,300 from, let's say, age 25 to 35.
Mhm.
But what we know about retirement investing and all of that, it's like, Okay, can you scrap together 2,300? Yeah, okay, somebody can. But
Mhm.
then they're
Yeah.
not likely being like, "And then I'm also
Yeah.
maxing out this."
Exactly. So that's where, like, sometimes the numbers, it doesn't come down to exactly the numbers because maybe the forgiveness route isn't the cheapest. But when we look at the opportunity cost, you're exactly right. You're hitting it like on the head where, you're not going to be able to save for retirement and have a $2,300 payment towards your student loans and pay your bills. You're just not. Like, dollars only go so far, and we can only do so many things with $1. So then we're having that conversation where, yeah, it's 20,000 more. Yeah, it's longer. It's a longer time frame, but it provides you the most opportunity to set yourself up financially for the future. Because those 10 years, just as you said, like 25 to 35 years old, like those are crucial. Those are
Mhm.
great saving years that you have time in the market that you will never be able to recoup if you missed out on it, you know?
Not even like the market, like looking at like, so yes, the
Mm,
market, but also like real estate. Like,
true. Yeah.
being if you were to buy, if you that you only had enough money to be renting
Mhm.
because you're like, I'm gonna rent and I'm gonna
Mhm.
like aggressively pay off this. Could you buy a property,
Mhm.
pay that minimum payment, be able to afford a property
Mhm.
that again, like 20 years later, real estate just goes up, like maybe
Mhm.
in a year by year not, but like having
Mhm.
being able to buy a property when you're 25 and then turn around at 45, like that in
Mhm.
itself is a huge retirement situation.
Mhm.
So like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh
So it provides the opportunity. Like, so it's a lot of like, even though we're talking about student loans, it's a lot of other like life conversations and
yeah.
like financial planning conversations that we have to have because of how big of an elephant this is. We have to be smart about how we're thinking about it and strategic. We can't just take like the old advice of pay it down like your hair's on fire. Like, that's probably not, because, and I tell folks all the time on my calls, like, you might be done with loans in 10 years. You'll be debt free, but you'll also have nothing else to show for it. And that's a really hard position to be in because you're kind of starting over. Like, you're starting over saving and being aggressive with savings. So it'll feel like you're just always behind in a sense, where if we did the forgiveness route, you're able to start doing those things earlier comfortably and not like put your life on hold to do those things either.
Yeah,
So,
it's you had said something about like it's switching how we think about debt. And
mhm,
I think I want to come back to who should not do the save.
mhm,
But like I first want to say, like, I feel like I was having a conversation. I don't remember what her name was. I think her name was Stephanie. And we were talking about this is like one of the things that we're seeing is the switching this idea of debt because so I'm 36 as we record
mhm.
this. My birthday's in like a week. So I will be 37.
Oh, yay.
But but my parents, they have this like no debt kind of
Mhm,
mindset. And I don't really know where that came from. But like stuff has changed. And so
mhm.
like a lot of people, even if you're graduating right now and you're 25, your parents are in their late 40s, they're probably still in that mindset of like all
Yeah,
debt is bad. All debt is
yeah,
bad because that's what we've been trained to think, but like they weren't playing the same game. Like if you have a
yeah,
45-year-old chiropractor, like their debt, oh, I would love to know what,
yeah.
right? Like,
It was
so
not the same, that's for sure.
no, no. And even buying a home, like all of
Yeah,
that stuff back then was like, it's just different.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay.
No, you're right. Debt used to be a lot more expensive, like, your parents or your grandparents literally used to have a double-digit, like, interest rate for their mortgage. So, like, people really think about the older kind of thoughts of or, like, the older realities of debt, which was debt was really expensive back then, and it definitely was, but now money is cheaper. Borrowing is
Mhm.
cheaper, mortgages, even though we saw interest rates go back up, compared to like 2020 and 2021, like we're at 6, 7%, where that's half of what like your parents used to pay or your grandparents used to pay. So it is just a different ball game. That's the reality of it.
Well, and these programs that are like, gosh, like the programs are really just set up so interesting that
Mhm.
it's like, well, why? It's like they don't want you to
Yeah.
pay it off.
Well, in a weird so I think what has
I
happened
was gonna say,
is
it's just you and I. Like, what's your conspiracies here?
my
Like,
oh yeah, I'll talk my thoughts. So I think at the end of the day, these plans did come about. So the income driven repayment wasn't designed to pay the loans off in a specific period of time. It was designed to make the payment affordable. And so they said, okay, well, if that's the case, they can't be paying this forever. Like there has to be an end in sight. So then the forgiveness terms came into play, like the 20 or 25 years. Schools figured it out. They said, hey, we could charge whatever we want for cost of attendance. The government's going to give us money because we dictate the cost of attendance. People will borrow it. We're going to tell everybody that they can make enough money to pay these off, but if they can't, they have forgiveness that they can go towards and the school makes their money. They have literally no incentive to keep the cost of school down. They don't because they're not on the hook for the forgiveness later. I mean, we all will at some point somehow be on the hook, maybe tax wise, but I think that's what happened. I think the schools figured out that like forgiveness existed, that they didn't have to really try to keep the cost down low because people could borrow up to the cost of attendance in student loans. And if they're not able to pay them back, they just go towards loan forgiveness. So I think that's why we are where we are right now with jumbo student loan balances because schools can
right.
charge it.
Hmm. So who should not do save? Like, who would be
Mhm,
someone like, I think you might have already answered this, is basically someone making a lot and their
mhm.
debt is not as much.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. Kind of going back to one of the earlier comments about the timeline, like someone who's maybe a newer borrower, um, will make really good income and they want to be done with this in 20 years instead of 25. Maybe the pay or the new IBR plan could be better. But yeah, I think those folks are the ones that could consider the 2, and then folks that will make a lot more than their balance eventually or in the near future, like, maybe paying the loans off is a better approach for them.
Got it. So this amount, so that you owe or that you have to pay the tax on for the forgiveness, are
Mhm.
there some states where you don't have to do that?
No, well, so we'll see because well, for
Was there
states
rumors that like they were going to get away with that tax?
yeah, and they've already waived the tax implication until 2026. So people who are getting the 20 and 25-year forgiveness right now are not having to pay taxes. So we're wondering if
Oh.
that's yeah, yeah.
Okay, so like you're saying if like 2023 was my 20th year
Mhm.
and they're like, "All right, well, we're writing off to or not writing off, what I don't know what the term. We're
Yeah.
forgiving 200,000.
Mhm.
You owe us 80,000."
Mhm.
Is that what you I think the math was?
Yeah.
Um, but you're not gonna have to pay that until 2026.
Yeah, you won't have to pay it at all. So the people who got loan forgiveness this year, next year, and in 2025, the tax implication is just waived for them.
Do you recommend holding out? Because, like, do you think there's still might be some changes that happen?
So, I don't think so, not to the taxes. So I've legitimately seen chiropractors who have had loans around for forever, since the 90s, get their loans forgiven right now. Like 20 we're in 2023 right now. So I've seen folks get the forgiveness and they have not been issued a 1099 or a tax document and we don't think they're going to have to pay taxes. It's in like the what was kind of brought about with the CARES Act.
You don't think they're gonna have to pay it even in 2026?
Mm-mm.
Why?
'Cause they got the forgiveness during this window of time where they had waived it. Yeah. So that's what makes me think it's gonna set a precedent or the expectation for
Right.
people that student loan forgiveness is tax-free because these people today aren't having to pay it. So, someone who gets a tax bill and for 2026 taxes, like, that's gonna be a rude awakening and that's gonna be an issue. Like
Okay, but then I have a question.
Yeah.
So let's say, okay, so just to repeat so I understand correctly, if my loans get forgiven,
Mhm.
like if I get to that 20-year mark before 2026, it's not in 2026 I'm going to have to owe. It's
Mm,
just not owed. The tax is
correct.
not owed. And they've said that.
Mhm.
Not
Yep.
delayed. It's just forgiven. They forgive
Right.
the forgiveness tax.
Correct. Yes.
So, are there people that are okay, so let's say I owe 80,000. All right, so we'll
Mhm.
do 200,000 and I owe 80,000.
Mhm.
Or I'm going to owe 80,000 and let's say that I'm supposed to um 20 years for me will be 2027.
Mhm.
Where right now, but so let's say the amount that I owe to student loan, oh no, it wouldn't be that because
Yeah.
the I don't actually ever owe 60,000. I still owe 200,000. I've just been paying the principal.
Mhm.
Okay, so I answered my own question
Yeah.
because I was
So
thinking
that
like,
that person would get the loan still forgiven, so the 200,000 forgiven, but then they'd have the taxes and supposedly they would
and
have to pay the
n-
tax bill.
there's
Yeah.
no way to get that. There's no way to cheat that system because you'd owe
Yeah.
200,000 still. Like it's not like, oh, quick, I'm going to quick pay it off. So I don't have to. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yep. I see. I answered my own
Yep.
math question. I'm sure somebody out there was thinking it. Um, okay. So you think that you're like, guess, and this is
Mhm.
not legal. This is not financial advice. This is just like two girls drinking coffee. So if
Mhm.
you had to guess what was going to happen in 2026, you think that enough people are going to be pissed off
Yeah.
that like, no, that's not fair. If my 20-year would have been 2025, there would
Mhm.
have been there's going to
Different
be enough.
story.
There's going to be lawsuit. I bet it gets just keep getting delayed, bare minimum.
Yep. And Congress is aware of how problematic this is because of the scope of like them not expecting like holy crap, like we didn't think people would have $200,000 balances getting canceled. Like we thought it was going to be a little bit left over. Like that's part of it, but also like people are unaware of this tax implication because why would you know about this? Like people
Right.
don't get debt canceled every day or every year. Like people don't know that stuff like that is taxable. And so, like, unless you are familiar with tax code, like a lot of people are just unaware of that. So when that tax bill does come due, it's going to be like catastrophic for someone who had no idea. And they're
Right.
going to have to go into a payment arrangement with the IRS. And it's
Which
going
they just got out of a payment arrangement.
to, yeah. So that's what Congress is aware of. They're like, oh, yeah, this is going to be bad. And so what's interesting is our government does have to budget out 10 years in advance and they have to, predict income sources, which is tax revenue. They're not predicting this tax implication being a revenue source. So that makes me think that they're not counting on it like for running the government operations.
Oh. Oh,
Yeah.
man, you, like, go deep into, like, looking at this I mean, I suppose it's your
Yeah.
job, but, like, so you looked and said, like, at their, like, future budget, there because this
Mhm.
has gotta be tons and tons of money
Mhm.
of, like, well, we've got all of these people who are going to in 2026, they're gonna owe
Mhm.
us hundreds of $1,000,000 for us writing
Mhm.
off that, and they're just like, We're not gonna even consider
Yeah.
that."
They didn't even put it into the budget. So I think it is more likely that we're not going to have the tax implication, but that probably is going to mean an overhaul in the student loan repayment system to some extent, which maybe not in the student loan repayment necessarily, because we kind of had that with the SAVE plan that just came out, but maybe with borrowing in general. I think there's going to have to be changes with borrowing and how much you can borrow, how much schools are able but then that gets into, like, a tricky spot because then are we telling schools how much they can charge for services
Well,
or
and the
for
government's not coming out bad. So,
Yeah.
like, let's say that they were like, "All right, we're gonna put a cap,"
Mm,
and school then becomes more affordable. So now you've got somebody was paying $200,000 for a, 8-year degree, postgraduate degree, and now it's like, "All right, we put a cap because $200,000 is, like, debilitating," and now,
mm,
like, people are coming out with, like, 60,000.
mhm.
So in that scenario, the government got less money.
Yeah.
Like, why would they want that? Because they're like, all right, good. This is an affordable amount that this person actually is going to pay off,
Mhm.
and we're not going to have to forgive anything.
Yeah.
But they only got I mean, well, no, they got interest and stuff like that. But like in the
Yeah.
example you gave, they got $290,000 on a
Mhm.
$200,000 thing. So they're like, oh, but we had to forgive. We didn't get that 200,000. It's like, no, yes, you did. You just no, yes, you did. You
Yeah.
because of interest, it's this, like, fake thing
Mhm.
of, like, "All right, well, we're gonna be nice, and
Yeah.
we aren't getting all of this money from you," and it's like, "No, but you did because you
Yeah.
set that interest." I feel like there's really smart people at play here. N
I think
Everybody's
so.
getting their own.
Everybody's getting a piece or a share somewhere. There is some, like, method to maybe some of this madness for yeah. But it is just an interesting system, and I think the cancellation was very, like, exciting for people, like, it really amped people up, like, "Oh, wow," like, we could get loans canceled, like, the 10,000 was so exciting, but then didn't end up coming through. Then we have so it's just there's so many things that have changed in the past, like, couple years with student loans where I think it has made the system more confusing, but also it's shined a lot of lights, like flashlights on this system too, for where I don't think we've seen the last of changes or the last of like probably, updates to repayment option. I don't know. I think there's a lot that still could happen, but all that to say, as crazy and complicated as this federal system is, it is way more flexible and can be way more affordable than privatizing loans, like
Mhm.
just going and refinancing. So it's very rare that we're recommending refinancing to a Chiro, even if the costs are very similar, like the cost difference, because it's just riskier. Like there's not income driven payments with refinancing, there's not forgiveness opportunities. So it's like a regular boring debt that you have to pay back. And that's when your mom is right. Like pay it off like your hair's on fire. If it's a private debt, that's what you want to do, but not with federal loans. We get a little interesting and then in the federal world.
I would postulate that it's very difficult because okay, so, like, the people who are making and we'll get back to money, I promise. This is
Mhm.
like we're not gonna turn this into a political conversation. But,
Mhm.
like, the people making the rules are either going to be, like, the Democratic Party passing this thing or the Republican Party passing this thing, right? And you've
Mhm.
got a ton like, the millennials are the people who have this debt and,
True.
Gen Z, like, the prime voting age that everyone's fighting over. So I can't imagine that I mean, politicians have kinda have their hands tied where they can't get stricter on it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
once you start being like, "Okay, here's the SAVE program. We didn't write off 10,000, but we gave you this program." And, like, we kind of like we're saying of like, "Okay, we're not gonna make you pay the forgiveness tax on the forgiveness for these years." Like, I don't know how they're gonna go back because then your party
Yeah.
looks like the one and then, like, then they don't get so they're just like, "Ah,
Mhm.
shit." So my guess is that things won't get stricter, but, like, I pulled that out of
Yeah.
my ass just, like, looking at
Yeah.
politicians and wanting to be in power. So,
Yeah. No, I agree because you wouldn't wanna be the person that said, "Oh, yeah, let's let taxes come back in." Like,
right.
you don't wanna be that guy.
No, you don't wanna be that guy. You have other way more important world politics and economics
Yeah.
that you're working on than, like, pissing off people who, you
Yeah.
know, that.
Highly
Okay.
educated people too,
Yeah.
like,
Yes,
that's the thing, like
highly educated. They went to school for a very long, expensive time. You're not pissing off the dummies who just went to 2-year plumbing school and now make $1,000,000 and have no debt. No, you're pissing off the person who owes 200 grand with a English literature degree.
Yeah.
Oh, if you didn't get the joke there, I don't think that plumbers are dummies because they really played a smart system.
Yeah. Any, what is it? Trade
Yes.
that, like yeah, like,
Right.
skip the school, guys. I'm just kidding, like,
I
yeah.
mean, do you know who Larry the Cable Guy is?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so, we live in the middle of nowhere, so, like, a celebrity having a house around us is, like, Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So he owns a house on this really nice lake that a lot of like Chicago money and Minneapolis money comes and buys. And so
Mhm.
like everybody knew like Larry the cable guy bought this house.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
this guy my husband graduated with who became either a plumber or an electrician bought it from Larry the
Mhm.
cable guy. Just like it's like he's doing okay. He's doing okay.
Yeah.
He's not
Yeah.
stressing about okay. So
Mhm.
let's switch gears a little bit here.
Mhm.
Let's say that you and I decide that we're going to do either the save or the pay plan. And like,
Mhm.
all right, Lauren, this is the game. You are going to pay $600 a month because that is your minimal payment. And I'm like, no,
Mhm.
but Megan, I have more money. I can throw more.
Mhm.
And you're like, no, this is the game. What are some of the things that you would recommend I do with that like extra money if you're
Mhm.
not letting me throw it at paying it off because that's not the smart thing?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think the other component is maybe saving conservatively for that tax implication. May or may not be here in the future, but doesn't hurt to save for it just in case.
Is there a place you can like okay, where would you save it? Like
Mhm.
what's the highest interest like easy place you could put it so you can be like, okay, in 20 years you can grab this out of there. Like where
Mhm.
would you save it? Box
Yeah.
under the mattress.
No.
No. Okay.
Not there. I would suggest looking at investing this money because it's probably still a long time horizon, like 20, 25 years. So not a retirement account though, because you want to have access to it probably before you turn 60 without any penalty. So you'd want to save and we would call it like a brokerage account or an individual investment account, which you can open up anywhere like Vanguard, Fidelity, and all it is an account that you put money into. You can put as much as you want in there, take money out whenever you want, but it's invested. So
Like
it's,
in the stock market?
yep,
Okay.
invested in the stock market. So, and I would suggest probably mutual funds or index funds. So it's diversified. It's not in like one company and committed to that one company's success. It's in multiple companies. So it's very diversified from that perspective.
And like
Um,
in general, right? Like
mhm.
the stock market, like people get all freaked out of like, oh, but I saw the S&P is down
Yeah.
23%. Like in general, 20 years from now is not.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my professors in college had the best analogy I think for the stock market that's always stuck with me. But think about investing, like it is variable. Like if you check your account every day, it's going to go up and down and that's going to freak you out. Even like month to month, like there's going to be some variability. So think about investing for the long term as just think about yourself starting at the bottom of an escalator. So an escalator that's going to go up to the next floor and you're playing with a yo-yo. So take that yo-yo, you're playing with the yo-yo, that's the
Mm,
stock market. You're going to have the ups and downs even though you're on the escalator going up. So
okay.
that's how I tell people to think about it. It's not a day-to-day thing that you want to be looking at or obsessing over. It's a long-term play. And historically, longer-term investing has yielded 7 to 10% on average. So if you're not investing, that's where you could be losing money because you're going up against inflation, you're not having your money work for you. And this is where time, like we were talking earlier about how so much time in the market is a great thing because you have so much time for your money to grow for you. Um, so yeah, that's the way to think about it. This is not a great place for your emergency savings, though. So don't put like your backup emergency funds in this account. That just needs to be in boring savings. But tax bomb savings, this is a great account for it. Could be also, backup retirement savings, could be savings for like, that you want to maybe use in 10 years for a home remodel or whatever. It's a flexible account. And then let's see, if the tax implication does not exist, then we have a lot of extra money that you could put towards
Mhm.
something else.
Yeah. So then at what point do you like just pour, are you saying like pour all of it there? At what point then do you go like, all right,
Mhm.
and then I'm also going to start doing a retirement?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Let's go back to that question. So, yeah, I think there's probably a calculation we can do to figure out how much you need to save for the taxes. Start doing that, get it on a habit, then prioritize saving for retirement. If you don't Well, there's always competing priorities, right? Because I think having emergency savings is important. So make sure you have emergency savings beefed up. 3 to 6 months of your living expenses could be a good amount. After that's done, like definitely start contributing to retirement, putting money in savings for maybe a shorter term goal. Like if you're interested in buying property, build up emergency savings or savings, I should say, to a point where maybe you could start looking at purchasing. Like you have enough for closing costs, maybe some for a down payment. So I think it depends on your goals from there. But I think the combination would be if you have extra money, save for the taxes, save for retirement, save for emergencies, and then save for your short-term goals, whatever those are. And then depending on what the goals are, that might dictate the priority.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's such a funny thing because I feel like it's eye-opening, like just investing in general. Like so debt payoff slash investing.
Mhm.
Um it's a game. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's a math equation game too. Like and I
Yeah.
feel like
A big math equation.
yeah. And I feel like we just graduate. So for years, like, do you think students are like, it just takes this long? Like, cause like I said, I'm in my late 30s and I'm like, oh, it's a game. So the person who doesn't seek out financial consult when
Mhm.
they're graduating, so their early 20s, their mid 20s, are you finding that they're having well, no, you're not talking to them. Like, are they having this epiphany because, like, conversations are happening around them, or are a lot of
Mhm.
them just kind of okay, so everybody's, like, waking up?
I think so. Well, and I think too, like earlier on, it might take some time for people to kind of see it this way because earlier on, when you just graduate, you're in like survival mode. You're trying to
Yes.
find your job. You're trying to, you're trying to do all these really big, impactful, competing things all at the same time. Like maybe you're getting married, maybe you're buying a house, maybe you've had a couple kids already. Like sometimes hard to like pause and look at your financial situation from like a bird's eye view to
Right.
figure out, oh, this is the game I'm playing. This is what I need to be doing. This is how I should think about it. And so sometimes it does take until your 30s where like you've started to establish those things where you could slow down and like take a second look at this. So I try to preach the education and help people earlier on when they're graduating and in the first couple of years of their career to start to see some of these things. But a lot of the perspective doesn't really come in until maybe a little later on, just because we haven't had time, and that's
Mhm.
okay.
I was talking to a guest once that said it wasn't until so I think it was called the country club rule or like so it
Hmm.
wasn't until Obama was in office and I never fact checked this because like I have on experts and you could literally tell me anything and I would be like she said it. She said it. Like you are
Right.
7 steps above TikTok in my brain. You're welcome. That was a compliment. That was a weird
Thank
one. Um,
you.
7 steps above TikTok. Okay, so she said that, like, there's this rule or this law that was revoked or passed in, like, around Obama's time, where, like,
Mhm.
up until that point, you couldn't have open conversations about investing and some of this stuff, and, like and it was that was why it was called the country club rule or
Oh.
whatever,
Mhm.
because the only way that people started to wake up to being smart with their money and investment and debt and like all of this was like talking to people like person to person. So if all of your friends were broke ass, you stayed broke ass. So if you were at the country club and you were lucky enough to be around rich people, those were the ones going like, "Oh, well, hey, don't
Mhm.
do this, this, and this with your money, and it's smart." Do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Um, I don't know about that specific law, but I do believe that there has been a lot more conversation around money in the past like 5, 10 years, which I love. I think this is a great direction for us to be moving in. But that's probably true too. Like who you surround yourself with is who you're going to be most like. We've always been taught that. That's probably true to some kind of like, statistical manner. But
Well, just even the way
yeah.
your parents thought about it too, of like, like we already said that, but like just thinking about, the idea that uh buying a laundromat. Well, is it cash flow positive? Like these are just like things where
Mhm.
you're just like thinking about debt in such a different way. Okay,
Yeah.
what question have I not asked you about
Mhm.
the new rules that is important for people to know?
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe one comment that I think is important is for those that maybe have been in repayment. I get this question daily right now, so I'm sure probably people listening to this might get it too or might have it too. But if you've been in repayment in the past, COVID turned off your payments and you're trying to figure out what this is going to look like in October because payments kick in October of 2023. Interest has already kicked back in from the COVID forbearance pause that we had for like 3.5 years. So a lot of the questions I'm getting right now is, well, when do I have to update my income? Because if you're on an income driven plan, you have to update every 12 months. So the answer to that question is no one has to update income until next year, 2024. You'll have like an anniversary date where you'd have to update. But the good news about that is probably 4 years ago, you weren't making as much money. So a lot
Why
of
is that
people are
good news?
asking, because if you're on an income driven plan, that income driven payment that was locked in 4 years ago is probably really small compared to what your income is now. So people are asking, like, well, should I switch to this new plan? Should I update my income right now? And the answer is probably no, because if you were in repayment before COVID, if you switch or if you update income, the payment's going to be higher before it needs to be because it may not
So
have to update until
so
next year.
ride every month of like if you were making less back then you
Mhm.
are now. Ride every month
Yeah.
before switching to
Mhm.
picking a plan. And you can do that. Okay.
Yep, you could switch to save at any point next year. So there's no rush to switch to save. The only like time constraint you want to know about is pay. If you're eligible for pay and you want to be on pay, and if you're not on it already, you do have to switch by July of next year. That's like one time constraint for the pay as you earn plan, but there's no limits to save.
Okay. So you have to decide what you're gonna do
Hmm.
before July.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Well,
But yeah.
as usual, you were depressing, but brought truth and math and
Yeah.
blew my mind open. We'll have you back in 2 more years. And oh, I'm going to be like, we're both going to be like in our 60s. And I'm going to be like, okay, so Megan, you're telling me.
You can't believe it.
Okay.
That'd be pretty wild, yeah. Lots will happen between now and our 60s.
No shit. Oh my God. Okay. How can someone who's like, I need to get my shit together, I need to
Mhm,
call Megan. How can
mhm.
someone work with you, find more of you?
Yeah, so, you can check out our website. So I'm a consultant with Student Loan Planner and a financial advisor for SLP Wealth. Start with Student Loan Planner for a consultation. We also have a lot of free content on our website, and blog posts, calculators. So if you had questions, there's a lot of free content you can access at studentloanplanner.com. And then you could schedule a consultation through there as well. We have a huge team now on the Student Loan Planner.
Yeah, it's almost like student loans are an epidemic.
Yeah. Gosh. So, and everyone on our team is super awesome. Like, if you don't get paired with me, um, my my time is a little more limited now because I'm doing a lot of the training and some of the management. But
You've been
um,
promoted since the last time that we spoke. Is that true?
yeah, so I'm
You're
a
more
senior
important now.
consultant. Yeah, I've got a lot more duties on my plate, and the new firm startup, SLP Wealth, has been a lot of work too. So it's been that's what I was telling you earlier. Like it's been busy. But our team is awesome. You'll find a lot of value in working with anybody on the student loan planner team. And, we can help navigate these student loan issues with you and make sure you've got the best plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I feel like you break down math in a way that is it's little bite pieces. It's like, okay, I can wrap
Yeah.
my head around that. Okay, I can wrap my head around that. And I think
Yeah.
that you provide like, money is such a huge stressor. Like it's
Hmm.
it's huge. And like, you know, so just being able to give people a little bit of hope that like this is gonna be okay. You picked a
Hmm.
good job. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna be fine. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, She Slayers, go check out studentloanplanner.com.
You
Okay.
got it.
Get those free resources, get hooked up with someone who can help you be smart about your money. And until next week, bye.